One of the most important things in my life has been my interaction with you guys out in the typewriter community. Being part of the typewriter revival or the typewriter community has been so important to me. And that's what's fueled a lot of the content on this channel and on my blog, joevancleave.com. It's also led me to stop and think about what is happening in our typewriter revival. And it looks like there's been several phases of a typewriter revival. I mean, I think about the maybe 2007 to 2010 time period when the typewriter bloggers first started getting really active and popular. That was a different era because not as many people are blogging now as are on, for instance, other forms of social media. It really has me thinking about the typewriter revival.
Well, hello to you and welcome back. So if you haven't been paying attention to the world of photography, there's been a little revival going on with film photography. Went to high school in the early 1970s, graduated in the mid-70s, and at that time, 35 millimeter film photography was the mainstream of what most people did as far as photography. But with the rise of digital cameras, film photography kind of took a downhill slide and it looked like it was going to be over. And the only cameras in manufacture that were still being made new were Leica, made the M7 film rangefinder camera, and then Lomography made the Lomo LCA, and they made some Holga type plastic, what you might call toy cameras. Other than that, though, new film cameras have kind of been on the decline, have kind of disappeared. And then all of a sudden in the last few years, there's this resurgence of interest in film photography, especially by younger people who didn't grow up with it. And I find some interesting parallels with the typewriter world, and I'd like to talk about that today, so stay tuned. So this story about the decline of film photography starts to resemble the decline of newly manufactured typewriters. Because right now in the year 2024, you can still buy a newly manufactured manual typewriter. They're very poor quality. They are really one step above a toy typewriter. In fact, I'll leave a link down below for a recent video about these typewriters and what kind of quality they are. It reminds me that if you wanted to go out today and buy a new typewriter, your choice is really going to be one kind of typewriter, a so-called daisy wheel or print wheel electronic typewriter. These are still being made new by Nakajima. You can buy them today online. The brother, as this one is, SX4000, have been out of manufacture for a few years, but there's still new old stock available brand new. You can still get ribbon cartridges, correction tape, and print wheels. You can still buy brand new print wheels, at least for a few of these brands like the Brother and the Nakajimas. So this is an interesting parallel between film cameras newly manufactured and typewriters being newly manufactured. In the case of film cameras, you have your choice of either a very expensive, like $6,000 or $7,000 Leica rangefinder. So I think in 2024, Leica just reintroduced or reissued the M6 film rangefinder. And that kind of represents a pinnacle of cost range of newly manufactured film cameras. They're very expensive. But at the other end of the extreme is the very low end, which are plastic, essentially toy cameras with usually plastic lens elements like the Holgas and that kind of camera, where it takes either 35 millimeter or 120 medium format film. It is a zone focus camera. There's usually one shutter speed around 1/100th of a second, plus a bulb setting for long time exposures. There's usually one or two aperture selections. These cameras are very limited in their ability to control exposure. Focusing is just a guess. They often have light leaks because of the quality of manufacture, and they only cost maybe $100 or less. So if you look at the world of newly manufactured film cameras, you have the extreme expensive and the extremely cheap. And with typewriters, on the other hand, you have pretty nicely performing new typewriters that are electronic daisy wheel machines. They cost maybe $300 to $400 brand new. They don't appeal to most typewriter hobbyists because the typewriter hobby world has this Venn diagram of people that want to write with typewriters, and then people that are antique collectors and more students of history. Especially for the collector historical people, newly manufactured or even any kind of plasticky electronic typewriter doesn't interest them at all. But for people that want to write to paper, have a typewriter-like experience, this kind of typewriter might satisfy some of that. However, it comes with a lot of caveats. It has to be plugged in. It has a kind of mechanical computer keyboard type feel. There's a little bit of a delay action between pressing the key and having the letter appear on the paper. So there are some kind of compromises there. And that's the same thing with the film photography world. But what's interesting now is there are some new players in the film market who are taking cinematographic film, that film like color negative film intended to be ran through motion picture cameras. So what some third-party companies are now doing is they're buying bulk reels of motion picture film. They're having it processed, oftentimes in China, in a facility that strips off the remjet layer without exposing the film. And then they will re-spool and repackage the film in 35 millimeter canisters with their own little cardboard boxes. They have their own branding. And so this is the kind of new color films that are often on the market now. There's a bunch of little small brands that are now selling this kind of motion picture film that's repackaged. So because of all this resurgence of interest, there are several manufacturers now that are starting to introduce this year, 2024, there are 2 new film cameras that are going to be in manufacture. So the first of those new film cameras is put out by Pentax, and this camera just got released in June of 2024. This is called the Pentax 17 or the Pentax 17. So this camera gets its name, the 17, from the fact that the image size is 24 by 17 millimeters. This is a so-called half frame camera, and you can get twice as many images out of a roll of film. So a 36 exposure roll is actually 72 images, etc. So this camera is just now on the market. A lot of controversy around it because a lot of old diehard people like me were expecting a film camera like a Pentax K1000 or one of the other film SLRs from the 1960s or 70s. Instead, they're getting this kind of point-and-shoot camera that doesn't have through-the-lens viewing. It's kind of a peep sight viewer. It's pretty much an automatic point-and-shoot camera. It has zone focusing. The zone focusing is by wire, which means that potentially they could release a full-size 24 by 36 format camera with autofocus, and that might be what they're planning on down the road. But this is the new Pentax 17. A lot of people love it. A lot of people don't like it, but Pentax has now announced they're having to ramp up production because the initial offering of these cameras sold out very quickly. So it looks very good for Pentax in the short run, and that's good for the newly manufactured film camera market. Speaking of which, there is a second manufacturer. So you might not have heard of Mint Camera. Mint is a little company out of Hong Kong, and what they started doing a few years ago is taking old Polaroid cameras, instant film cameras, and remodeling them and modernizing them for use with new Polaroid film and even with Fuji Instax instant film. And Mint does quite a good job on building quality cameras and reconditioning cameras, but now they are going to be releasing in this year a remake of the German Rolly point-and-shoot camera, and they're going to call it the Rolly 35 AF. So this is styled to look like the classic old little Rolly point-and-shoot. It's going to be a film camera, but the AF part of it is going to be autofocus. It's going to have some kind of an infrared laser LED kind of autofocusing system. So this camera is coming out later, like the fall of 2024, and a lot of people are really excited about it. It's going to sell for maybe $700 or $800 US. The Pentax 17 is selling for about $500 US. So both of these cameras represent new manufactured film cameras in the year 2024, along with the high-priced Leica M6, of course, and the few of the Lomo type toy cameras. So getting back to typewriters though, what would happen if a manufacturer started releasing new typewriters? Like good quality typewriters would that revolutionize the typewriter world? Like, would it do something to kickstart even further the typewriter revival? Well, I have mixed feelings about that. And the reason why is because I'm sitting next to a recently manufactured typewriter, representative of the kind that they still make today, and not very many people buy them. Especially typewriter collectors don't buy these. And yet, these print exceptionally good quality text. I would say better than an IBM Selectric, more uniform. It has interchangeable type elements for different typefaces or fonts, lift-off correction, and some of the fancier models have a built-in memory where you can kind of electronically write your document and proof it in a liquid crystal screen before you print it to paper. There's various versions of these with different levels of automation. But these are already being made. These have been made all along since the 1980s, and they're not causing a revival in typewriters because the typewriter people just aren't interested in these. So I find it an interesting dichotomy, therefore, between the typewriter world, the typewriter revival, and the film camera revival and what's happening in the film world. The film camera revival looks like it's a true revival because manufacturers are newly introducing new cameras that appear to be of decent quality compared to the standards of the 1970s or 80s. Whereas other than the daisy wheel electronic typewriters, there are no new typewriters being made of any quality. So we're stuck with an existing number of antiques. And so it is a revival. It is a typewriter revival in the sense of a revival of interest in antique typewriters. And all of the elements of the typewriter world that keep it going, like Ted Monk and the wonderful job he does with the typewriter database and the reprints of the typewriter repair Bibles, for instance, and all the other bloggers and other people of expertise who let their knowledge be known for us to share and to learn from and to keep our machines running. But that's not a real revival. A revival would be if a typewriter company makes a high-quality typewriter new. Yeah, they actually do. But typewriter people don't want them. So what's keeping those daisy wheel typewriters in business that you see on Amazon and other online sales sites are other businesses. Other businesses have a need to put an envelope or whatever into a typewriter and type them up. It's not the typewriter community that's keeping daisy wheel typewriters in business. It's other businesses. So, is it a revival? Is it a typewriter revival? I'm not so sure, but I'd love to hear your comments down below. And as always, stay creative with your typewriters and have yourselves a nice day. Bye-bye for now.